Is Pope Francis really against blessing same-sex unions? Join us with this report, Church Militant's Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, as you know, the Pope's watchdog group on doctrine, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, in March 2021 sent out a letter that said you can't bless same-sex unions. Now someone seems to be walking that back. Can you go ahead and take us through this one?
Brad, Juan Carlos Cruz, a Chilean homosexual, a very close friend of Pope Francis, made an astonishing comment at the conference for LGBTQI people at the Fordham University yesterday on Sunday. This conference is organized by the notorious homosexualist Father James Martin. And this is what Juan Carlos Cruz had to say. Listen very carefully to this.
But I wrote an article in a Chilean newspaper when he wrote, when that letter from the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith came out 2 years ago, saying you can't bless, you know, it's a sin to bless marriages, whatever. He was hurt with that because I feel, and this is weird to say, and this is my view, so I am not a Vatican insider. I mean, in fact, I'm scared of them, but I could see how hurt he was when people were horrified by it, of course, and he told me, look, I didn't sign it, which doesn't, you know, exculpate him. He ultimately, obviously, it's the Pope who, you know, but to his defense, and you'll have to trust me that the people that wrote that letter are no longer in the CDF, and that's really good. But we need to do much more.
Jules, before going on, I'd like to read just a little bit from that letter. It was a question to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and it actually said, you know, asked, does the church have the power to give the blessing to unions of persons in the same sex? Response was no, and here was a salient point from there. It is not licit, and this was in March 15th, 2021. Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, the head dicastery on faith and doctrine. It is not licit to impart a blessing on relationships or partnerships, even stable, that involve sexual activity outside of marriage, as is the case of the unions between persons of the same sex. It said these, even though these may have positive elements, may exist within here, within the context of a union, this union is not ordered to the Creator's plan. So that's what was sent out. We were all kind of surprised by that, I guess. This was when the synodal way and process was all going hot and heavy in Germany, and they were asking about all that blessing of same-sex marriage. Now we say the Pope is really was made sad by it, didn't sign it, but at the same time, even Carlos Cruz actually recognizes the fact that it did go out, in fact, underneath the Pope, and the Pope has the ultimate say in that. Can you catch us up on who Cruz is?
Before I tell you who Cruz is, Brad, let me add a couple of things. The responsum of S.T.B made it very clear. It had a brilliant statement saying God cannot bless sin. And therefore, the church, of course, cannot bless sin, which is same-sex couples living together. The person who issued this document was an Italian Archbishop, Giacomo Morandi. And we did a story a few months ago showing how Morandi was basically kicked upstairs. He was transferred out of the dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith because Pope Francis was so unhappy with this statement that seemed to somehow have escaped Pope Francis's direct gaze. I mean, he has tons of documents every day that he signs, and he's not going to read every single document. He trusts those people who are giving him the document. And if Giacomo Morandi gave him a synopsis of the document, and he simply signed it without looking at it closely, what Juan Carlos Cruz has said is definitely true. Now, Juan Carlos is a homosexual at the moment. He says he does not have a partner, but he says openly that he is an activist trying to change the church's teaching on sodomy, on homosexuality. In his talk at Fordham University, he praises the dissident nun, Sister Janine Granick, and he repeatedly talks about his extremely close relationship with Pope Francis. Remember, he was abused himself, and we can talk about this, by a priest in Chile.
Now, Jules, we did a Rome Dispatch last week where the Pope actually mentioned this gig at Fordham and also thanked Father James Martin for his input there. So he knew that this was coming up, and all the speakers there and everything. And he was actually, I can't imagine people sending their kids to this Catholic university, a Jesuit university, and then having to deal with people like Cruz. Can you give us the title specifically that Cruz was given by the Vatican just recently? Because he actually has a position in Rome of sorts.
Absolutely, Brad. In fact, when we did the Rome Dispatch, we read out Pope Francis's letter, handwritten in Spanish, to Father James Martin, which said, "Thank you" 5 times. Now, Francis knows very well what James Martin is up to, but we had Pope splainers on the internet indulging in the most, twisting themselves into pretzels and engaging in the most grotesque forms of exegetical gymnastics, basically defending Pope Francis and saying, there was nothing wrong with this. But Juan Carlos Cruz has been appointed by Pope Francis to the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors, which is the body supervising sexual abuse, not supervising in the sense of approving, but supervising in the sense of attempting to stamp out clerical sex abuse in the worldwide church.
And it's amazing, Jules, that as you say, he's actually trying to change church teaching on this. You would think that people that were out to change church teaching wouldn't be the ones who were tapped for a particular position in Rome, but we've seen that that's not always the case. A number of times in the past, Cruz has made reference to his friendship with Francis. That was also given top billing by Father James Martin when he introduced him at Fordham. Can you go ahead and give us some of the statements in the past that Cruz has made about Pope Francis and what he said that were never clarified, never walked back by the Pope, that raised some eyebrows?
Well, this was covered extensively by the media in 2018. Cruz went open with the fact that he said this is what Pope Francis told him. I quote, "Juan Carlos, the fact that you are gay does not matter. God made you like this," Pope Francis told Juan Carlos, "and loves you like this, and I don't care. The Pope loves you like this. You have to be happy with who you are." The Pope or the Vatican never, ever said that. The Pope did not say this.
And that's almost like saying God made you gay and wills you to be gay, and that's something that's against the church teaching. They say it's an inordinate situation within a person's persona here in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and even in their latest document in 2021 said that this is not an ordered, something that God orders, is the same-sex union and all that. Now, let's go on with Cruz as a victim, also the clerical sex abuse, as you mentioned. This was big. Francis only defrocked the abuser, Caradima, after everything came to light. Can you go ahead and walk us through that?
Francis was told a number of times about Caradima's abuser. Caradima's superior, his archbishop, had been elevated. The cardinal, in fact, had been elevated to Francis's inner circle, you know, the G9, his closest advisors. Victims continued to complain, but Francis actually seemed to tell them when he came back from Chile, and while Francis was in Chile, that the victims were making all this stuff up. But finally, when things got too hot, Francis did defrog Karadima.
What did? Well, we already have that Francis did affirm the homosexuality of Cruz in 2018, as you had mentioned. Did Francis actually consult Cruz when the Pope spoke against the criminalization of homosexuality?
Now, this is very big, Brad. In his talk at Fordham University, Juan Carlos Cruz claims that Francis phoned him saying that he was going to be interviewed by the Associated Press. That fact is correct. We know that because Francis was gave an extensive interview to the left-wing Associated Press. And Francis said to him, according to Juan Carlos, I would like to have some talking points from you on how I present the church's position on the LGBTQI position, issue, particularly with reference to the criminalization of homosexuality. Francis, remember, then went to Africa and was very vocal about countries that continue to have sodomy as a criminal offense. And Juan Carlos, virtually reprimands the Ugandan Catholic bishops for basically snubbing Francis, because very recently, last month, in fact, the Parliament of Uganda went ahead with criminalizing homosexuality. And the Catholic bishops have supported, though not as vocally as the Anglican bishops, but they have definitely done that in case of the bill in Uganda.
Now, another point here, Jules. Francis is meeting with Cruz later this week, so he says, right?
Absolutely. Cruz says he's going to Ireland and he's going to drop in. And Francis has said, and this is immediately after Francis left hospital, they had a chat. Cruz also boasts about how when he went there, Francis said, well, come and stay with me. And, he says he didn't take his partner because he doesn't have a partner currently. But 3 other men brought their wives and they all stayed at Santa Casa Marta with Casa Santa Marta with Francis. And Cruz talks about how, the bishops, Francis told them to go and find their own room elsewhere. So what Cruz is doing again and again and again in this talk is demonstrating the close relationship he enjoys with the pontiff of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, I just can't help this whole thing highlights what we talked about in our Rome Dispatch this last week, is the fact that that Fordham University is actually working to undermine the teaching of the Catholic Church. People there working there to erode and continually undermine like rodents within the church. It's a Catholic university, for crying out loud. Well, anyway, it also highlights the fact that Christ's mystical body, the Catholic Church, will never fail. Popes with their personal feelings may come and go, but Christ's unchanging truths will endure until the end of time. Jules, thanks for the report and the insights.
Thank you, Brad.